Welcome to the Healing While Discovering Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Michelle. I'm an intuitive transformational coach, certified life coach, certified NLP practitioner, and speaker. I've spent the last 22 plus years helping myself and my clients learn how to create their own happiness and live more abundant lives. In this time, I've also overcome and healed from child sexual molestation, a compulsive eating disorder, hunger, and homelessness. Now it's your turn to move forward with your life and heal from childhood traumas or past experiences. In this podcast, I'll share how I was able to overcome all of my past struggles, as well as my personal stories of overcoming jealousy, loneliness, resentment, and bitterness, and how I learned to forgive. I'll also help you explore your shadow self, deal with having low or no self-esteem, and address feelings of not being worthy or loved. Using my personal experiences and extensive training, as well as stories of grief, loss, depression, and anxiety from my guests, I'll help you change your life and finally heal. Hey, love. Did you ever have to mediate the conflicts between your parents when you were growing up? Or did you have to take care of or live in the house with a parent who was ill, or did you face any illness as a child? If so, then there is a possibility that you may not have been able to have the childhood that you had wished that you had. You know, the ones that you saw on TV. Well, I want to invite you to my 90-minute powerful workshop called How to Grieve the Loss of Your Childhood, Surviving Childhood Trauma. Did you know that childhood trauma is more common than you think? And about 70% of adults across 6 continents have reported at least one traumatic experience in their lives. But guess what? Your trauma does not have to be a source of shame. And that's why I would love for you to join me in this powerful workshop, How to Grieve the Loss of Your Childhood, Surviving Childhood Trauma. In this workshop, I'm going to share with you 3 steps for you to begin grieving and continue on your healing journey. We're going to talk about how trauma impacts all of us, what it means to actually grieve the loss of your childhood, and I'm going to discuss the major difference between big T and little t trauma, as well as potential sources of trauma. In addition to all of that, there's going to be a live Q&A at the end to make sure that I answer all of your questions. If this sounds interesting to you, or if you know that there's some childhood trauma that you are ready to release, then I would love for you to join me in this powerful 90-minute workshop. Hey, loves. Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Healing While Discovering Yourself podcast. Hopefully this is not the first episode that you've listened to on the podcast, because if it is, I am going to ask you to go back and listen to 2 episodes before this one, because this is the 3rd episode in a series of 3 on attachment styles. So if this is your first one, of course, you may certainly just listen to this one. But if you like more context and greater understanding, I would at least advise that you go back to listen to episode 52 and episode 53 so that you can have a better understanding. But again, it's not necessary. It's your life. It is your call. But I do want to just thank you so much for being here, for deciding to hit play, for deciding to download this episode, because, you know, this really truly is a labor of love. And I try to, actually, I'm not even going to say I try to. Everything that I do it with my heart and with my soul, and I give it the very best that I have. And so to know that you are listening to it, I'm just so humbled and I'm so grateful. And I so appreciate your time, because your time is valuable. And so is my time, right? I know that your time is valuable because I value my time. And by extension, I value your time. So let's quickly go over, a brief overview of what we talked about in the previous podcast episodes. This particular episode, we're going to focus on adult attachment styles and some things that you can do to shift or change your attachment style. So, obviously, like I said earlier in the first couple of episodes, I just basically talked about what attachment style is and kind of, how it got started. John Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth, with her strange situation. And then later there was a fourth attachment style that was developed. And we talked about how our attachment styles are formed. They're actually formed in infancy. And we typically carry those same attachment styles with us throughout our lives. And especially if we don't do anything to change or shift our attachment styles, a lot of people actually have the same attachment style. And we also talked about, the importance of knowing what your attachment style is, because your attachment style actually has an impact on your parenting style. So if you, have an anxious attachment style, then you will probably fall in line. And I'm actually going to do a podcast episode on parenting styles because I think that it's important for us to know. But your attachment style dictates what your parenting style is. So if you have an anxious attachment style, chances are you're going to parent in an anxious way. It's not called that. They have different names. And for whatever reason, right now, I'm blanking on the parenting styles that are out there. There are 5 of them, 5 different parenting styles. And for whatever reason, I'm blanking all of a sudden on what they are. And they're not anxious and, like the attachment styles, they're not named the same way. I think there's authoritative, authoritarian. Anyway, I'm going to do a whole episode on parenting styles, but the reason why, again, or one of the reasons why it's important to, know what your attachment style is because it has a greater impact. It's not just, oh, this is my style as a child and it doesn't affect me anymore. No, it actually does, because attachment, it influences our physical, neurological, cognitive, and psychological development. And children develop attachment relationships with the most neglectful and abusive caregivers. So, the question is not, do I have an attachment style or whatever? The question is, what is the quality, right? So everyone is attached to someone, even abusive and neglectful caregivers, right? And so when we meet people and they react or respond a certain way, and you think, well, how could you be like this toward this person, a parent or whatever, they abused you, they were neglectful. Well, because they actually did develop an attachment to this particular person, right? So everyone has an attachment style. And so it's important for us to know that, especially as we go through life and we deal with different people. And then lastly, we talked about the 4 attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. And we know that our attachment styles have a great impact, a huge impact on our relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but on all of our relationships, how we relate to people. So today I want to talk to you specifically about adult attachment styles. Now, they're still the same as they were when you were a child. And I was going to say they actually show up differently, but they actually don't show up differently. They show up the exact same way they did in childhood. It just looks differently because you're an adult. And so let's look at secure, right? Secure adults hold a positive self-image of themselves and others, meaning that they had both a sense of worthiness and expectation that other people were generally accepting and responsive, right? So if you have a secure attachment style, then you basically have a good view of yourself and other people, and you're relatively trusting in your relationships. And typically people who have a secure attachment, they develop mature and long-lasting relationships. They're capable of accepting rejection Okay, this is important. And moving on despite the pain, but they're also capable of being loyal and sacrificing when necessary. Additionally, adults who have a secure attachment styles are comfortable displaying interest and affection. You know, if they see someone, again, it doesn't have to be romantic, that they feel like there's chemistry with, they have no problem with letting that person know. There have been a few people in my life where I've desired to develop a friendship with them. And I've had no problem with saying, you know what, I would love to develop a friendship with you. Some of those people, our friendship has thrived and continues to thrive. And some of those people, we were friends for a little bit and, you know, they went their way, I went mine. And that's just the way it is. But a securely attached adult will have no problem with displaying interest and affection. They're comfortable with being alone and independent and display a healthy level of self-confidence, or meaning, if you remember our the podcast episode on ego is not your enemy, they have a healthy ego. Okay. And then lastly, they're comfortable with forming intimate relationships with people, period. I am so grateful that I have extremely intimate relationships with some of my girlfriends. And obviously I have an intimate relationship with my husband. Well, actually, it's not obvious, because you never know. Nobody knows where the nose goes when the doors close. Y'all remember that? No, am I dating myself? Okay, never mind, y'all. But again, secure people have no problem with developing intimate and close relationships with people around them. Now, people with an avoidant or a dismissive attachment style, they have, generally speaking, a positive self-image of themselves and a negative self-image of other people. So they prefer to avoid close relationships of intimacy with others in order to maintain a sense of independence and invulnerability. So they're less able to trust others and find it difficult to develop close, intimate relationships. And here's the thing about dismissive avoidant attachment style is that they deny experiencing distress associated with relationships and downplay the importance of attachment in general, viewing other people as trustworthy. You know, it's like, I don't need to be in a relationship. I don't need anybody. I'm good by myself. And generally speaking, there's nothing wrong with being independent, but what characterizes the avoidant or dismissive attachment style is not just being independent, but it's the distrust of other people. You know, it's not deeming other people as worthy of your trust. And what's interesting is that people with this attachment style are least likely to enter into a relationship, right? But they're most likely to report never having been in love, right? So they maintain an emotional distance, and they also have the lowest level of commitment in their relationships of secure, obviously avoidant and ambivalent or anxious, right? So people who are avoidant, they keep distance and they have the lowest level of commitment. They're extremely independent, self-directed, and often uncomfortable with intimacy, right? Like that's their thing. The intimacy piece, they could do without. And then they're expert at rationalizing their way out of an intimate situation. You know, when they notice that relationships are becoming really close, then, oh, wait, no, we've got to stop because I need to work, or I need to focus on building my business or writing a book or, you know, recording a podcast. I can't be intimate with you. So that's a part of their attachment style. They're paranoid that others want to control them or put them in the box. In every relationship, they always have an exit strategy. Why? Because they don't trust people, right? They don't trust people. They don't believe that people have their best interest in mind. It doesn't matter who you are. They ain't going for it, right? And they construct their lifestyles in a way to avoid commitment or too much intimate contact. Again, a lot of people who, are workaholics or find that they're always talking about, I need my space. I need my space. Yeah, and they probably do need their space. And it's because they have an avoidant attachment style. And so they're not necessarily comfortable with intimacy. And again, they score people with an avoidant attachment style have extremely high self-confidence, but they're also low on emotional expression and warmth, right? They come across as, all confident and I got this and everything else, but don't expect for them to be a shoulder for you to cry on. And they usually make pretty bad caregivers, whether, again, it's caring for a parent, even a child, a spouse, like that's just not their forte. Why? Because they don't like the intimacy. And, they don't rely on other people, even when they should. They prefer to be alone. People with an avoidant attachment style, they prefer to be alone. Just, you know what? Leave me alone. Leave me be. I'm good where I am. And then lastly, they tend to be the ones in control of their friendships and romantic relationships. And they're almost always willing to leave, right? So confident, strong, independent, distrust others. And again, they have to be the ones in control in their relationships. And they are almost always willing to leave because they always have an exit strategy. Why? Because they don't trust people. That's just, and in the other episodes, I talked about, how these different attachment styles are, how they're developed. So if you're curious about that, make sure you go back and listen to, I believe it's episode 53, which talks about the 4 attachment styles and how they're developed. So people with avoidant attachment styles, they're in control and they don't trust people and they would rather be alone. Now, people with an anxious attachment style, they are overly concerned with the uncertainty of their relationship. And they're extremely insecure people. And so are avoidant people. People with avoidant attachment styles are insecure. People with anxious attachment styles are insecure. People with a disorganized attachment style is insecure. Obviously, the secure attachment style is not secure. But it's also important to note, and, I'll get into this later, but, our attachment styles can change. But let me just finish talking about the anxious attachment style as an adult, and unlike avoidant, people with an avoidant attachment style where they have very high self-esteem and really regard other people as like low on a totem pole. The opposite is true of people with an anxious attachment style. They actually have a negative self-image, right? So they're very insecure, not confident at all, and a positive image of others, meaning that they have a sense of unworthiness, but they generally evaluate other people as being positive. And they become close to their adult partners, but often worry that their partners will not return their affection, right? So avoidants are like, stay away from me. I don't want nothing to do with you. And anxious people are like, no, please love me. Like, I need you near me. I need you to tell me like a million times a day that you love me in order for me to know that you love me. And people with this attachment style, they have the most short-lived romantic relationships. So they fall in love, enter relationships really, really quickly because they don't want to be alone, right? And they enter into these relationships even before they know much about their partner. Now, to be clear, this is not like, it's not that everybody who enters into relationships, they have an anxious attachment style, because, I met my husband 3 months later, we were engaged, 10 months after that, we were married. Right. And now we've been together for this year, we'll make 15 years, and we are happy with one another. So I'm not saying that if you enter into a relationship quickly, that means that you have an anxious attachment style. But what I am saying is they enter relationships quickly before they know the person. And these relationships are usually short-lived, right? So it means that they have a lot of relationships over a short period of time, and they're often nervous and stressed about the status of their relationship. They need constant reassurance and affection from their partner, and they have extreme trouble being alone or single. And because of this, they often enter into unhealthy or abusive relationships, and they have trouble trusting people, even if they're close to them. And they excessively rely on other people to meet their emotional needs and resolve their problems, right? So it's like, I got a problem. You say you love me, but do you really love me? But yet at the same time, they rely on this person who they're questioning whether they love them or not, right? But these are the characteristics of an anxious attachment style. And also because of this, they let themselves be controlled in their relationships, right? It's like they need other people. Again, avoidance are like, stay away, I'm good. Whereas anxious people are like, come on, please love me. Tell me you love me. How do you count the ways? Let me count the ways you love me, right? What is it? I don't remember whatever, y'all. Don't pay me no mind. But I found this interesting when I was doing research on adult attachment styles, that there was a study conducted at like a marriage license bureau, and they found that anxious men acquired marriage licenses after a shorter courtship than did secure men or avoidant men or disorganized men. And then they were also the most upset and angriest of the types when their love is not or was not reciprocated. So I thought that was an interesting fact about, anxious people men with an anxious attachment style. Because generally, when we think about these attachment styles, it's so easy for us to put a face, make a woman the face of these attachment styles. And it's simply not true. And typically, and I would have to do greater research on this topic, but I believe that women generally have an anxious attachment style, while more men have an avoidant attachment style. Don't quote me on that, but I believe in just doing the research again for this podcast episode. I think I remember reading that, but y'all know I always say, do your own research. Like, don't just rely on me, or anybody to tell you anything. Do your own research so you can decide whether or not you want to, after doing the research, you can decide whether or not you agree or disagree, or, you want to make something a belief or value, or, whatever it is. Like, always do your own research. So the last attachment style is disorganized, and sometimes it's called like anxious avoidant, because it's like a combination of and the reason why it's called disorganized, because it's a combination of anxious people and avoidant people. And based on what I've just discussed here now, they're kind of like polar opposites. So that's why it's like disorganized, and they show unstable and ambiguous behaviors in their social bonds. Why? Because it's like, oh, love me, love me, love me, love me, lovely. Stay away, stay away, stay away, stay away. And I'm not laughing at people with a disorganized attachment style. I'm not laughing at anybody for having whatever attachment style they're having. I'm just chuckling because I'm thinking about the dynamic of being like, oh man, like I need Ron to tell me he loves me. But I also need Ron to stay away. There's a couple of memes going around Facebook that pop in my head, and that's part of why I'm like chuckling. But as I said before, a disorganized attachment style brings together both the anxious and the avoidant attachment styles. And so for adults with an avoid or disorganized attachment style, the partner in the relationship are often sources of desire and fear. So if you have a disorganized attachment style, understand that the person that they're in a relationship with can be the affection of their desire, like, oh my gosh, I want to be with them, right? And then also the fear, the thing that they fear, like, oh my gosh, like, are they going to leave me? Do they really love me? All that, and they're afraid of intimacy and commitment and distrust. And they also lash out at anyone who tries to get close to them, right? Again, because it's bringing this anxious and avoidant. So again, they're afraid of intimacy and commitment and distrust, and they lash out at anyone who tries to get close to them. They either spend time alone or in abusive, dysfunctional relationships. So it's usually like go big or go home. Either I'm going to be by myself, or when they are in relationships, the relationships are usually very toxic and very explosive. They're low in confidence and they really don't express themselves to anyone. And typically they suppress their emotions for fear of, getting hurt, for fear of people leaving them for a number of reasons, right? So they lack the confidence in themselves. And then, they suppress their emotions. But what's interesting, or I should say, and what's interesting is that when they do express their emotions, it often tends to be in like these outbursts or rageful states, especially when they're under pressure, because they suppress. It's like a pressure cooker. They ultimately explode. Everyone always explodes. And that's why I'm so passionate about, normalizing the healing process, because, all of us need an outlet to express ourselves. And then the distrust prevents them from seeking the help that they need, which is unfortunate because people with disorganized attachment styles, generally speaking, they cannot help themselves. They're usually incapable of helping themselves. And so it's really sad because because of the distrust that they have, it prevents them from seeking the help that they need. And they avoid intimacy, not because they prefer to be alone, like avoidance, people who are avoidants, they want to be alone, right? But they avoid intimacy because they're terrified of the potential hurt that a relationship or intimacy may cause them. So those are the 4 adult attachment styles. I mean, they're the attachment styles, right? But I just explained how it shows up in adults and in their interactions and relationships with one another. And again, also remember, it shows up in your relationships with your children and has an impact on your parenting style. And what I think is interesting when it comes to like relationship attraction is that, secure people are, for the most part, capable of dating pretty much both the anxious and avoidant types, because they're comfortable enough with themselves to give the anxious types of attachment people, the reassurance they need, and then also comfortable enough to give the avoidant types the space that they need without feeling threatened themselves. You know what I'm saying? And so a person with a secure attachment style is able to be in a relationship with an anxious person and just be like, hey, you know what? I love you. I love you. What you talking about? I love you. And, all, and at the same time, if they're in a relationship with, a person who's avoidant, they're able to be like, okay, you know what? You need your space. I will give you whatever space you need. We'll only talk once a day. I don't need to talk to you 10, 15, 20 times a day. I don't need to be texting you. I'll give you your space without taking it personal and feeling like, oh, they don't want to be with me. And so anxious avoidance, they usually end up together. People who are one person who is either anxious and the other person is avoidant, they end up together more often than like two anxious people or two avoidant people, because avoidant types are good at putting others off. That oftentimes it's only the anxious types that are like, oh, okay, I'll stick around. I'll wait for you because I need to know that you love me and I need you to know that that I love you. And so usually these type of relationships with the anxious and avoidance, they fall into a pattern of like chaser, chasee, right? Which are roles the anxious and avoidant types need in order to feel comfortable with intimacy, right? So one needs to be the chaser and one needs to be the one who is being chased. And so that dynamic in and of itself is what they need in order for the relationship to feel intimate to each of them. Because to an avoidant, intimacy, using air quotes for those not watching the video, intimacy to an avoidant is having that distance. Okay, good. I don't have to be in their face all the time, right? But then, the anxious type, of course, they're afraid, oh, what's going to happen? And then the disorganized, people with a disorganized attachment style, generally speaking, they only date each other. Or if they do date a different attachment style, it would be like someone who's extreme and has an anxious attachment style who is extremely insecure, or someone who has an avoidant attachment style who is extremely insecure. And these relationships are usually, again, toxic and abusive and neglectful. They're emotionally unavailable towards each other. And then when they do come together, it's always this big explosion amongst the two. And people in these relationships, you're like, dang, they always fighting, but they still together. You're like, how are they still together? They're always fighting. And it's because their attachment styles, they mesh, and that's what they need to survive. So really quickly, I want to tell you how to shift from one attachment style to another. And it's important to note that at any given time, the attachment style that people display is the one that is called into play by their partner's behavior and the type of relationship that they've created as a couple. And so basically what that means is, for some people, their attachment style changes based on their partner. And their partner can be a friendship or it could be a romantic relationship, right? And it can even be, parent and child, especially if the child is older or an adult or whatever. So, we can like shift in and out, and all of us have characteristics of each of the attachment styles in us. And we also do have a default attachment style. And sometimes we take on or we display characteristics of all of the attachment styles. And so people can respond to, situational variables in their relationships, displaying a more secure attachment style in one relationship and a more anxious attachment style in another, or evolving in their attachment style within one relationship as time goes by. People mature, people learn more information, right? And so they can be in a relationship with a person and they can shift their attachment styles within that relationship, especially if both people are working towards, like the same thing. Anxious or avoidance who enter long-term relationships with secure people can level up their attachment style to the level of the secure person, over an extended period of time. But then also the opposite of that can be true, that they can also, if an anxious or avoidant person enters a relationship with a secure person, they can also bring the secure person down to either an anxious or avoidant level or attachment style, based on how the relationship plays out. And we see this all the time. We see someone who is extremely secure, extremely confident, doing their thing, and they meet someone, and this person may be either anxious or avoidant. And they spend time together. This person is secure. The person who is anxious, avoidant, they're developing a more secure relationship. The relationship thrives. Everybody's doing well. And then there's a source of stress or tension. And the person who was anxious avoidant, they then go back to whatever their default attachment style is or was, and they burn the secure person. They end up breaking up. The anxious person takes all the secure person's money and just uses and abuses them, talks about them badly. Well, now this person who was secure is now bitter, right? They're bitter. It's like, man, you used to be such a great person and great attitude and great personality. And now you're bitter because of what happened in the relationship between this anxious or avoidant person. So it's always a good idea to be selective of who you enter into relationships with. And another thing that can shift our attachment style are, life events like divorce or death, or any type of event, like all of a sudden getting receiving, you've been working on yourself, you receive this, great promotion, like that can automatically catapult you into, or I shouldn't say automatic because you've been doing the work to have a secure attachment style. But some of the things that you can do to shift from a disorganized and anxious or an avoidant attachment style is heal from the trauma, right? The attachment style that you have, it developed in infancy. Right. And if it developed in infancy, then there's nothing that you could have done to create or control, the attachment style that you had. You had to rely on the adults around you. And for, I'm sure, a number of valid reasons, they were just unavailable. So you can heal from the trauma, all of the trauma going back, to childhood and up through adulthood. You can heal from it and then observe, identify, and express your emotional needs. Obviously, do this in the presence of people, even if you don't feel like you can trust them. Do it in the presence of people who at least at certain points make you feel safe, right? Because that's important. Also, you can accept yourself, right? Accept yourself for who you are. You're worthy of healing. You're worthy of whatever it is that you need. And your past is your past. Review the past, forgive what needs to be forgiven, release, let go, and move forward and accept yourself, flaws and all. And, be authentic in your interactions with people. Even if you're not ready to be in relationships with people, just be authentic in your interactions with them, in your engagements. Just be you. If you're clumsy, be clumsy. I mean, try not to, because you don't want to spill nobody. Y'all know what I'm saying. But just be you. And then lastly, resolve conflict. Don't be afraid of conflict. Conflict is not a bad thing. Conflict gives you the opportunity to solidify, or cause you to examine your core beliefs and your values and the stories that you've been telling yourself over time. All right. So, y'all really sincerely, truly, honestly, thank you so much for sticking with me. If you've been around for all three episodes in the attachment series, thank you so much for sticking around. If you'd like to take the attachment style quiz to learn what your attachment style is, we will leave that in the show notes. You can click on the link and discover what your attachment style is now. And it really focuses on what your attachment style is again now, not necessarily what it was as a child. And I'm actually in the process of developing a very thorough attachment style quiz so you can look at what was your attachment style, as a child, and, what it is today, and really how it really truly does impact you. Because I think it'll answer a lot of questions that you may have about why you do the things that you do. So if you'd like to continue this conversation, then I'm going to invite you to my private healing community on Facebook called Healing While Discovering Yourself, named after the podcast, where I go live every Friday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time for Coffee Talks with Andrea. And we basically continue the discussion of the podcast, and I answer your questions live. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can go to andreamichelle.com/groups, or you can go to Facebook and put in the search engine, Healing While Discovering Yourself, and the community should show up. Request to join, answer one question, and boom, bam, you live with me. All right, y'all, just know that as I go, the love in me salutes the love in you. Hey loves, are you looking for a safe place to hang out while you're healing with other like-minded individuals? If so, then I would love for you to join my private Facebook community called Healing While Discovering Yourself, named after the podcast. This community is for those who are truly seeking a safe place to heal and also show up authentically. If this interests you, then I'm going to invite you to go to Facebook/groups/healing while discovering. I look forward to seeing you in the group. What would you do if you knew that in 5 minutes you could take back control of your life, calm your nerves, and shift into your power? You would take advantage of that offer, wouldn't you? Well, I would love to share with you my proprietary The More Method. It's a method that I use every day to help me take back control of my life and master my inner world. See, I don't know if anyone has ever told you, but you are not just a physical being. You are not just a spiritual being, you are a multi-dimensional being. And that means that you are spiritual, you are mental, you are emotional, and you are physical. The More Method is designed to help you truly take back control of your life and master your inner world, every area of your inner world, so that you can show up authentically and unapologetically. Go to themoremethod.co. Again, that's themoremethod.co to download the video and amazing guide to show you how to take back control of your life and master your inner world in as little as 5 minutes a day.